Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. In this podcast, I'll share stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So let's go back in time for some of the top news stories from this week in 1920. Local telephone system has troubles of its own as a result of recent storms. Next time when you grab the crank of your telephone box, or whatever the curious little dingus is called, and twist the daylights out of it without getting a reply, don't cuss the whole system, but give a moment's thought to the difficulties under which the local telephone company is struggling along. According to the opinion of B.L. Brown, manager of the local telephone company, the average farmer who was obliged to do over considerable work because of the recent bad storms doesn't begin to know what trouble really is. To begin with, the local telephone service consists of 68 circuits and covers about 45 miles of pole lines to serve 150 subscribers. When the big storm hit this district early last month, it evidently played more kinds of havoc. It washed out telephone poles in all directions, dropped broken branches on wires, short-circuited various sections of mechanism, and did innumerable other things that only a telephone expert could discover. The sections hurt most seriously were those to Elkton, Federal Point, and the Gopher Ridge district, although every circuit suffered to a greater or less extent. The Federal Point and Gopher Ridge circuits are back in working order, and it's expected the Elkton circuit will be repaired by the end of this week. However, the work has been badly hampered by the difficulty encountered by the telephone repairing outfit in hiring help. A special effort was made to get additional help while the big storm was yet in progress. But out of more than 40 men interviewed, only one failed to plead sickness or other incapacity, which left 3 men to repair the entire damage. Later, 2 temporary volunteers were obtained from the forces of the White House Barrel Company, enabling the telephone men to get lines operating after a fashion with a comparatively short time. All this came as an additional burden for every telephone company, whether in Hastings or New York, is continually suffering from temporary minor defects, which tie up one line or another until they could be located and repaired. These may be in a form so slight as to require long and careful search before they're located. For instance, a crank which persisted in sticking recently tied up the entire Federal Point circuit for an extended period while the telephone man searched the line from one end to the other for the trouble. Again, a small twig landed on 2 wires and tied up a circuit for another period. Furthermore, the telephone material is very expensive and hard to obtain. When the exchange moved last fall, it was forced to wait for 125 feet of cable, which had been ordered in December 1918, but which failed to put in an appearance until October 1919. Airplane knocks man's head off in Daytona. His head nearly severed from his body, W. Radway, a blind man of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, was instantly killed by an airplane of the Princeton Flying School on the Ocean Beach opposite Marshall Park. Mr. Radway, who was about 60 years of age and so blind that he could distinguish light from darkness only, was walking along the beach in the company of George B. Nobles of Eaton Rapids, Michigan, when the airplane, piloted by Gus Elkstrom of the Princeton School Squadron, was taxiing along the beach and struck him. Mr. Nobles was struck by one of the wings of the plane and badly shaken up with injuries to his back and head. After treatment by Dr. Taylor, he returned to his home at the beach. It seems the 2 men knew the plane was about to start, and Mr. Nobles remarked to Mr. Radway that they had better get close to the water's edge so as to allow the plane plenty of room. Hardly were the words out of his mouth, however, before they were struck. Pilot Elkstrom stated to the Daytona Daily News following the accident that he had noticed the 2 men on the beach ahead of him, and while looking out the right side of his machine, saw them walking south with their backs toward him. He then looked out to the left side to see if his course was clear, and the first thing he knew, his engine ground, and he shut it off to find the man struck. He was of the opinion the 2 men had walked toward the waterfront while he was looking out the opposite side of his machine, and in this way they crossed his course, misjudging his speed. Mr. Elkstrom states that his speed was very slow, and proof of this was found in the fact that he stopped the plane within 25 or 30 feet after striking Mr. Radway. The accident is the first serious one on the beach this season, although almost daily accidents have been avoided by only a hair's breadth. It is emphasized that pedestrians should always be on a close lookout while on the beach since more than a half dozen planes are daily flying on the beach. On to this week's Talk of the Times, where I give you a glimpse of what people were thinking over 100 years ago. This week, we're talking about a special St. Patrick's Day celebration in nearby St. Augustine. When you think of St. Patrick's Day, you probably think of Ireland and parades. So you'd probably think the first St. Patrick's Day parade was in Ireland, right? Wrong. The first St. Patrick's Day parade was held in Ireland in 1903, but the first one in St. Johns County, Florida, was held in St. Augustine over 300 years earlier, in 1601. In reality, St. Augustine set the trend for Ireland. St. Patrick's Day's only been celebrated as a religious holiday since 1631 in the rest of the world, and that was 31 years after St. Augustine held their first celebration. In 2017, historian Dr. J. Michael Francis uncovered some Spanish documents that discussed a feast day of St. Patrick in 1600 in St. Augustine, where the cannon were fired in celebration. In 1601, the residents of St. Augustine decided to one-up their previous year's celebration, and they all got together and paraded through the city to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. So why was St. Patrick such a big deal in Old Spanish St. Augustine? Well, they had named him the official protector of the city's maize fields, so they definitely wanted to appreciate him in hopes of bringing good crops that year. And historians believe naming him as the protector of the city and praising him so highly came from St. Augustine's parish priest, Ricardo Artur, or Richard Arthur, who served from 1597 to 1604 and was of Irish descent. Once the priest disappeared from the records of St. Augustine, the celebration of St. Patrick also faded out. Since there was no continuation of the traditions and parade, St. Augustine can't claim the longest continual parade, which Boston and New York still claim credit for, with theirs starting in the 1760s. But we can claim we were the first, over 150 years before those parades began. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast is brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, where we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to 100 years ago. With St. Patrick's Day coming, let's talk about an Irish tune that everyone knows. It's a tune you may think goes back many years, a ballad that pretty much everyone sings on St. Patrick's Day, Danny Boy. But the song isn't as old as you may think. It was actually written just over 100 years ago. The music for the folk tune was written in the 1800s and called Londonderry Air, but the words to the song came about when English lyricist Frederick Weatherly wrote them. There are quite a few stories on how this happened. Some say he had written the words and they just happened to fit to the tune of Londonderry Air. Others say he heard the song and thought it needed words, so he penned the lyrics. No matter what initiated the writing of the lyrics, in 1915, vocalist Elise Griffin was recorded singing it, and it became very popular very quickly. So what's the meaning behind the song Danny Boy? Depends on who you ask. Some say it's a song about a parent singing about a son going off to war. Others say it's a song for a lost love. When the sheet music was printed of the song with Weatherly's notes, it said that when sung by a man, the words Danny Boy should be changed to Eily Dear, which tends to support that second theory. So let's listen to the song considered the national anthem of Ireland. This version is the one I grew up knowing, recorded only 50 or so years ago, with my father Sabas on guitar and my mother Sherry singing. Here they are with Danny Boy.
Oh, Danny Boy, the pipes are falling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the leaves when